Activate.
Hey everybody, DJ Kelly Reverb here. Welcome to This Pink Cloud. We are a show that is about multiple pathways to recovery, mental health, all that good stuff. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Comment too, right, Chad?
Yeah, you should probably comment on stuff or about things.
Just things.
Comment things and stuff.
Anyway, so how are you doing today, dude? You got your redone tattoo and you're all kinds of fancy.
Well,
you're a bit of a dandy today.
So I think my number one goal in the entire United world, other than meeting Madonna or shopping at Tom Thumb while meeting Madonna, is probably to be fancy.
And fancy you are.
I try to be.
And you've
so
lost
fancy.
some LBs, dude.
Yeah. Turns out like
Ozempic works or trizepatide works.
Yeah, that and like walking and actually eating healthier.
Right.
I wouldn't do any of that eating healthier stuff if I wasn't, paying for something. So I feel like I'd be wasting my money if I didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of like me paying for my rehab. When I went to rehab, I actually wanted it to work.
Yeah.
When you pay for it yourself.
Yeah. I'm like, fuck, I'm paying for it.
Right. Might as well make it work. Yeah. The last week when you came in, it was like your beard smelled like Arby's. And
nah, dude, I don't eat Arby's that much, dude. Fuck you.
It smelled like a gordita. Anyway, excited to have this young lady on. She is actually a go-go dancer extraordinaire in the scene. And then she's also 23 years sober, which is amazing to me. Yeah.
Michael Jordan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Give it up for Kriss Reign, everybody. How are you?
Good, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, good, man. I'm glad you could make it on the show. I guess you're friends with Miss Joy, who we had on, and then she was like, you should have her on. And I was like, we should. So here you are.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So you're in Florida currently right now?
Currently, yes. I'm originally from here, but I've lived in Boston most of my life.
Okay, cool. And then what city are you in right now?
Right now I'm in Fort Lauderdale, but I'm currently living in Orlando.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but you literally travel to dance at parties, right?
Yeah, anywhere. I'm happy to travel.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. That's very gypsy and very, a cool way to live, to see the world and to, do what you love.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, so let's hear the backstory. I mean, you're 23 years sober, and I'm like, well, God, dude, what did she get sober when she was like 10?
I get that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. But so let's hear the backstory.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that though, because the longer I've been sober, the more aware I am of my age, and the more aware everyone is of my age.
Right.
So I'm 41 now.
Okay. Well, you look great. 18. You look great for 41. Yes. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Naturally gray hair, right?
I figured I'd get on top of it ahead of time.
Right.
But yeah, I did get started young, and I got sober young.
Right.
So I think that presented its own challenges, because when I was getting sober was the age most people are starting to actually experiment with drugs or alcohol or just going to college.
Right. Well, when did you start? When did you start, like, the scene? Where, like, was it in the 90s or?
It was in the late 90s. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I started kind of like dabbling in when I was 14, 15, back when people weren't really paying attention to age or legal venues or things like that. So I did get the tail end of that 90s rave scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, at that time, as much as using was a big part of feeling okay and finding a thing that made me feel okay, it was that dance music culture also.
Mm-hmm.
that really made me feel at home then. And I'm very fortunate to them be able to come back to that
Right.
once I was sober, which a lot of people can't.
Oh yeah. I
Um,
mean, it was definitely weird when I came back to DJ the first time sober. I was like,
right.
this is going to be different.
It's different. It's different. I
Yeah.
mean, fortunately for me, I don't have the association with like bars and clubs necessarily because I was 18 when I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, yeah, it's different. It's
Well,
different than most people.
let's hear the story that led up to 18 and getting sober. So, what was the backstory on that?
I think I had a lot of, there's a separation, right? There's the addiction, and then there's the things that cause the addiction.
Sure.
So leading up to that, I had a lot of early childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of behavioral issues, so to speak. I'd been kicked out of a lot of schools. I started getting kicked out of schools when I was 10.
Mm.
And then from there on, I really didn't stay in a school for more than a year and a half at a time. Um, and so I kind of really picked up in my early teens.
Okay.
Um, my father was a heavy drinker. My
Mm-hmm.
grandparents were heavy drinkers. It was accessible to me.
Right. So it was
Um,
just the liquor cabinet was always full at the Rain
it was
household.
there. It was
Right. Yeah.
there until they kind of realized, and then they did things like putting chains and padlocks on it, which I thought was funny at the time.
Right.
Um,
That is
yeah,
funny. Yeah.
it is. I mean, when you put the chain around the fridge, I thought it was hilarious. But
I wish we had a picture.
I do too. But it's being so young when I got started, it was actually outside of that, it was hard for me to get a hold of alcohol. And at a young
Mm-hmm.
age, it's a lot easier to get drugs,
Oh
which is
yeah.
weird. But it was kind of the alcohol was the driving force. The drugs ended up being more accessible.
Right. Well, it's funny that you
So,
say that. Like, it's funny. It's okay. I could get like, you know, pure MDMA on the dark web easier than I can get heartworm pills for my dog.
right,
Literally, like
right.
I
It's
was like,
crazy.
yeah. I'm like, really? Okay, y'all gave me the wrong prescription. Can somebody just change that? And then it's like,
Right,
well, no, you have to come in, and then you have to see the vet that prescribed it, and blah blah blah. And I'm like,
right.
wow, dude, yeah. So
I'm
I
just
get
gonna go
it.
buy
Yeah,
Molly.
Right? Yeah, I'm just gonna go
I'm just
get
gonna give my dog fucking
right.
Molly.
It's
right.
accessible.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, but it all escalated very quickly.
Right. Well, and
Um,
I guess also, you know, Florida also had, you know, they're notorious for competitive Molly taking. You
oh,
know,
of course, of
it was
course.
just like, how many beans are you on this evening? And it's just like, I'm
Right.
like, God, what is wrong with you people, dude? Like,
I
it's like
know. I know.
I'm up to 15 tonight. I'm like, well,
Right.
good
Not
for
even that, but
you.
like, how much
Yeah.
money do you have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, so was it ecstasy, was it coke, was it all of the above, or what was the drug of choice?
The drug of choice was primarily alcohol and then ultimately meth.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Ah, okay.
the party drugs were great when I could get a hold of them. I was definitely more into uppers though.
Yeah.
Um, and when in Boston anyway, meth was more accessible to me
Mm-hmm.
than, you know, some of the nicer drugs, I guess.
Right. Right. I gotcha.
But at the end of the day, it was kind of like kind of like a dumpster junkie, like whatever I could get a hold of, as much
Mm-hmm.
as I could get a hold of.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of having this, I'm a Capricorn, I'm a perfectionist, and it was this level of like I want to be the best junkie I can be. And
Right.
there's people out there that are so much worse than me. So like there was never this kind of like I had this comparison of like, I'm here, but I really need to get like here
Right.
and have
I think
nobody
we
in my
could
family speak
up
to
it a
me
little bit.
and
Yeah,
not wear
right.
shoes anymore and just kind of like run the streets. That's the goal. That's the ideal.
Okay. Right.
So I was kind of like going as hard and fast as I could on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So a couple of years into that, though, I was getting into legal trouble at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
I was on probation. Uh, Ultimately, I got pulled off the street, so to speak, because I got caught breaking into houses.
Okay.
So I had some pretty serious charges against me at that point and was given the choice to go to rehab or go
Mm-hmm.
to juvie.
Right. And you're
And
still a minor at this time. So you're
yeah,
like
I was a
16.
minor.
Uh-huh.
I was about to turn 16, yeah. I'd
Mm-hmm.
been kicked out of another school only a month in at that point. That was my personal best.
Nice.
Um,
Congratulations.
and yeah, I mean, I was on like a first name basis with the cops in my town because I was getting PC'd constantly and
Mm-hmm.
just pulled into. Do you guys know what that is? I don't know if that's
Yeah.
like a northeastern colloquialism. I say
Well,
that to people and they have
for
no
the
idea what
for
I'm
the
talking about.
for those that don't know, what is PC?
It's police custody.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So not necessarily arrested, but you are getting a ride in the backseat of a cop car.
Right. We're not going to put cuffs on you. We just want to give you a ride.
Cuffs were sometimes there. That was a
Yeah.
factor. So I
Yeah.
definitely got the experience of sliding across the plastic benches and back with my arms behind me. So
Right.
it was kind of
That-
more of that like you again. All
right.
right.
Yeah. I gotcha.
But once it got to that point, the judge gave me a choice of juvie or rehab. I said juvie because in my mind I could still get fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You're a very disturbed little girl. You're going to rehab."
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I was court ordered to rehab.
Okay.
Um, and when I got kicked out of there,
Okay.
I got sent to like a one of those troubled teen residential treatment facilities in northern
Okay.
Idaho.
All right.
Like a
You
kidnap you
know,
type of place.
that's exactly it. Yeah, so I got
Yeah.
kidnapped in the middle of the night after the cops finally recovered me. I got kicked out of rehab because I kept running away, and I ended up
Uh-huh.
hitchhiking across Pennsylvania and spent a week in a crack house at 15 years
Ah,
old with a bunch of truckers doing meth in the basement for a week. Uh,
nice.
yeah, so
That must have
when the
been
cops,
interesting as a like a 16-year-old or 15 year
15-year-old, yeah.
old. Yeah, that's like
yeah, I didn't see anything wrong with it at the time. I mean,
yeah, what it
now
were
obviously terrifying.
yeah, were the truckers like were they friendly or were they creepy or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I was I don't remember a lot of it, if I'm being totally
Okay.
honest.
Sure.
They seem nice enough for people willing to do hard drugs with a teenager.
So probably a
Right.
pretty good blend of both. Probably a
Right.
pretty good blend of
Yeah,
both on that.
yeah.
Uh
Ironically, though, it was actually I was in Pennsylvania when I was in rehab, and the cops down there were they weren't going to come look for me, and it was actually a cop up in Boston that I'd had a couple run-ins with who saw something in me at that time that I didn't see in myself, and he came down from Massachusetts to look for me.
oh wow.
And
Okay.
ultimately, you know, he probably saved my life.
Oh wow. So so was he like a friend of the family or did he become a friend of the family? I guess
No,
through
yeah,
no.
he kind of became a friend of the family.
Mhm.
He had been one of the officers when I got caught breaking into the house.
Mhm.
And he at the time sat me down and kind of gave me the business. And kind of the
Mhm.
long and short of that was if I kept doing this, those combat boots that I liked so much were going to end up my ass.
Right.
And I was like, this guy's cool if he's going to talk to me like that. Like, he's pretty cool.
Right.
So, but he, you know, I guess we built a rapport in a very weird way, but he came and
Mm-hmm.
looked for me, which was huge.
Yeah.
Um, but at that point, you know, the kidnap thing was already in play and the escorts had been called. And yeah, I got shipped to North Idaho, and that was horrific.
Yeah.
Um, so, and that's, you know, that's something, it's funny because when I was there for about 2.5 years. and ultimately got sober out there.
In
Not
Idaho?
through AA. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it was in the program that I ended up at, I did they have the schools, they also have the outdoor boot camps, they have
Right. Like
the
it's like
psychiatric facilities.
dig ditches kind of thing, like labor
Exactly.
camps.
It's manual
Yeah.
labor. It's the place I ended up was founded by people who were members of Synanon. Have you heard of
Okay.
that? The cult in
Uh-uh.
California. It was
Oh,
big in the
nice. I like it.
70s.
I like it that it's
Right.
cult adjacent.
Yeah.
Cult
It's
adjacent
absolutely.
recovery is perfect. Yeah. That's my
Right,
favorite.
right. So like I've survived a cult, so that's
Right. It's funny that you
cool.
say this because like we also had a friend on the show that was like basically one of the child labor camps, but it was in Mexico. So you can imagine that. Like
he's escaped. He escaped it twice, dude. I was like, dude, that's amazing that you. Yeah, he made his way back to the U.S. twice. I was like, dude, you should have been recruited by like
right.
Navy
Yeah, it was like
somebody.
it was like Navy. It was like Navy SEAL stuff. Like
yeah, I mean,
and
there's
he's
money
like
in those
he's like
skills.
15. He's like 15, navigating the
the wilderness,
the wilderness of Mexico.
Right.
cross
dude.
back over the border
Right.
without an ID. Yeah,
Right. But you did.
I
I
mean,
mean,
honestly, we tried to do that too, but we were 15 miles from the Canadian border. So we were way up in the panhandle in a very poor town, and the locals were essentially paid to hunt us if
Oh,
we
nice.
got out. So they would, you'd show up at a door thinking you could use your phone. You found a friend.
Well, boys, we got us
"Yeah, come on in."
Well, boys, we got us a child hunt
that's
tonight.
a fucking horror movie. That's a horror
and
movie
they got
set for sure.
lanterns and stuff. And
Yeah, that's what it was. If the bears didn't get you, the mountain lions, it was the locals.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
So, and the places I went to ultimately did get shut down for child abuse. So,
right.
the time out there now, I mean, you look at it and it's torture by
Right. So,
definition.
but I mean, it eventually did work, and you said 2.5 years there. At what point?
It did.
At what point did you give up and just give in and just go, okay, cool.
It wasn't.
I'm gonna fall in love.
It wasn't.
No,
Never.
never.
These programs. Well, that's the thing. These programs are built to break you down and then build you into the character that they think would be better for society.
Sure.
That's the whole goal. Is break you down.
Right.
And there's many, many tactics to do that. There's, sleep deprivation, extreme sound, light, things like that, manual labor.
Jesus Christ.
Right,
You're in a fucking CIA black site.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's you very limited contact with your parents. If you say anything, they are told that, we're being manipulative. We're trying to get sent home, not to believe anything we say. So when we're saying very real things, phone privileges would be taken away. Not that we had phone privileges. We had one call every other week for 5 minutes that was supervised.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
And for me, and the way it was set up too is that it was called attack therapy. So it was set up to peer monitor, essentially, where you are constantly on alert and everybody around you is watching everything you do.
Oh,
and
everyone's a narc.
Exactly. That's the only way you can kind of save yourself from additional punishment is to confront people, rat people out, and that's the only way to then make your life a little easier. And for me,
they call it holding them accountable.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. For me, though, it was I never broke. I just refused. And so I made my time out there very difficult. I was one of like 2 people in the history of the outdoor boot camp to get sent back more than once, because they make it so bad you never want to do that again. And it was a very painful couple of years for me, and I made it more painful for myself by not giving into that. But I have, even through everything, a very clear moral compass, and that is not fucking people over to make my life a little bit better.
Right.
So about 2 years into that, though, I realized, because I was out there, I learned how to brew alcohol. Anything that anybody said could get me fucked up, I tried. From things like growing mold on bread with oranges, to actually, like somebody told me once that if you put toothpaste on an orange peel and then let it sit in the sun for 2 weeks and then eat that, that'll make you trip. I tried it. It was worth it, right?
Right?
No.
Sure.
No,
Not
you
so
never get
much.
that taste out of your mouth.
Right.
I had, we were all heavily, heavily medicated. I had a med ring kind of going at a certain point
Oh,
with people
nice.
tweaking their meds to make a little jar for me and then for distribution to other people. Uh,
Nice.
so I spent that time not on street drugs, but certainly not sober.
Right.
But I reached a point the whole time I was out there, they kept saying, you're going to be a failure for the rest of your life. You
Mm-hmm.
are going to be a fuck up. You are never going to succeed. You are never going to hold a job. You are never going to be happy if you keep doing what you're doing here and resisting this program. And that made me dig in more. But eventually, for myself, I think a big part of it up to that point through everything, even before I was using, was like, this was something that was being done to me. I am being kicked out of this school, not because of something that I did, but it's being done to me. I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
punished out here in Idaho, not because of
Right.
something I did. And it was kind of suddenly realizing,
The victim
no,
mentality.
exactly,
Yeah.
totally. But that, at that point in my life, I kind of sucked. And it
Right.
wasn't being done to me. I had done some awful, awful things.
Mm-hmm.
And if I kept going the way I was going, I was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even like a jails, institutions kind of thing. I was already in an institution. I had been in a lockdown facility for
Yeah.
9 months consecutively where I didn't go outside for nine
Mm-hmm.
months. I've been there. I've done
Yeah.
that part of it. And the next option was death. And realizing too, when I got out, I was 18 and there were going to be a lot of different things available to me very quickly. Um, and I was so sick of also just feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many different levels of self harm involved. It was the substance, it was cutting, it was putting myself in situations that purposefully where I potentially could get hurt or
Right.
killed or be with people who were very dangerous to a
Well, I
young
mean, you're
girl.
15 and doing meth with truckers, so
Right.
like, it's
Right. I
like,
mean, exactly.
yeah, that's definitely
There's
sketchy. And
certain,
then I
it
guess
is.
but to ask you about the cutting part, is that like for you? Was it just so you could feel like you had some control, or to create some pain, to maybe
To
disconnect
offset.
from? Yeah, what was it
Yeah.
for you that you know?
It was like my feelings were, I didn't have a way to manage or control them or process them at that point. And it felt like I was coming out of my own skin. And
Mm-hmm.
it was as if I couldn't use, it was the only thing. And I also, I had so many other mental things going along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the clinical depression. I have at 16 diagnosed PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
not having tools to deal with that, and that being the only thing to provide even just a moment of calm and almost clarity and relief.
Right.
Um, and it wasn't, you don't see them, it's not on my arms, it wasn't in a way to get attention, or it wasn't a cry for help. It's primarily on my legs, places people, I mean, now could see if they wanted to,
Right.
but I wasn't looking for somebody to stop me. I was
Mm-hmm.
looking for the pain to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these things should have gotten stitches. I still have pretty big scars.
Right.
Um, but all of those were together. These were the coping mechanisms that I developed because I couldn't figure out a way to exist otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was
Well,
after
I'm
years of therapy too. So
right. Yeah. I mean, I always find that fascinating, and I always want to, because people just don't understand it, but there is a
no,
logic behind self harm,
right,
like
right.
cutting and stuff. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And it releases chemicals in your brain
Mm-hmm.
that then, you know, make you
Reward
feel
you
a
in
certain
some way.
way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
In
yeah.
some way. In some
Mm-hmm.
way. It's like anything. It's like a big scare. It's adrenaline. It's dopamine. Any
Mm-hmm.
little hit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's something, I find it's for me, I'm comfortable talking about that. I find it actually makes other people more uncomfortable though. So I
Right. Well,
appreciate you asking me about that. So
Yeah, well, I mean, because I had a niece and she was doing that as well, and I always find it fascinating that but you explained it very clearly. I mean, it was like a dopamine hit, and it was a way
right,
of you controlling your own environment,
right,
and when you couldn't use.
right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And ultimately, though, all of this comes from pain,
Mm-hmm.
all of it. And I think there's a disconnect at times, especially in the rooms in recovery, of losing sight of where does this come from? This didn't start the first time you picked up.
Mm-hmm.
This started for most of us at a pretty young age,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't really fully process that or realize that, or we can't articulate that. We can't
Sure.
articulate the pain that we're in, even to ourselves most of the time at that point.
Right.
So I think there's a real value, and I think personally, I think there should be more emphasis on discovering kind of what those core issues are, and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of the feelings that come from it, and then the behaviors that you have as a result.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, let's throw to commercial real quick, and here's our new sponsor. Hey guys, Kelly Reverb here. Yep, you guessed it. We have no sponsor. Hey, so if you want to be a sponsor of the show, be sure and hit me up on thispinkcloud@gmail.com. Also, hit the link tree, please. We could always use your support. There is a one-time donation. There is a monthly support button, all that stuff. Also, we're doing shout outs. So if you want a shout out, we can work that out. And if you want to be a guest, hit me up. All this good stuff can happen via email at thispinkcloud@gmail.com. All right. Well, we appreciate your continued support. We always love you guys. All right. And that's our new sponsor. I love them.
Yeah.
And then we also have some new music out. And here it is. All right, and that is our new stuff, and it is doing fantastic. We actually hit 100,000 streams on the track called Government.
That track was just simply designed to tell the story of so many people who have been hurt and disjointed by the American government and shadow governments around the world.
It's not just the American government.
There's so many shadow governments around the world.
Could you tell us who the people responsible for that is, Chad?
There's quite a few long lists. I do believe that a good portion or a section of that list is probably also flown on the same list that was on a private jet to an island from Mr. Epstein.
All right. Well, fair enough. Anyway, be sure to like, subscribe, all that stuff on Spotify. And then the podcast is also on Spotify, so be sure and follow us there. But anyway, so back to Kriss Reign here in Florida. So yeah, you were talking about the cutting, and I appreciate you being
Getting out
open.
of the CIA black site.
Yeah, exactly. So take us from there.
I just reached this point of I don't want to feel this way anymore, and realizing that it's optional to not feel this way. Like this is a choice. I'm actively making decisions to make myself feel like shit all the time.
Right.
And I did not want it. And it wasn't, I guess, like, I've had conversations with my mom about this of like, because I think she feels a certain amount of guilt for having sent me out there, because at the time it was the 90s. The internet wasn't really so much of a thing. Nobody could research these things, so she didn't know. And so to this day, she feels awful, especially now that there's like all these documentaries coming out about these things.
Is there a documentary about your specific cult or where you went?
About the school. So Paris Hilton made a documentary about the place in Provo, which was in the same family of schools.
Right. Yeah. Now
she was there. Kat Von D was there. A lot of people were there at the same time I was in Idaho. And then there's also a school in California that's in the same family. But there have been like on Netflix, maybe the program came out. I haven't watched that myself. Just that's still like a little too much for me.
A little too fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, there's certain things, But from what I've heard, it is a fairly good depiction of
what went on,
what we experienced. But for me, it was just realizing that, like, I'm 18 years old. At that point, I actually had an extended custody filed against me, meaning that I didn't have the rights of an 18-year-old until I was released from this program, so I couldn't just walk out. But once I was finally out of there, that I was on my own, and that I was going to have to like keep going the way I was going, end up somewhere worse potentially, or I could get my shit together.
Right. Now, when they let you out of when they let you out of the program, did they actually was it just like, here's the front door, or did they at least fly you back?
No. So again, I did kind of my own route in all of this. The program was set up with like kind of milestones, and it was like there was a lot of like pageantry that went with it to make you feel really good when you hit these like things, and there would be like 12-hour, 24-hour, 72-hour things were kept in a barn, essentially going through extreme emotional growth situations. And at the end, you would graduate, big deal. Your parents come, they come pick you up. Everybody cries. It's great. They play The Rose.
So the Rose, like the song, like
the song. I mean, there's certain songs to this day, like
some say
weren't allowed.
love it is.
Nice. Exactly. But there's certain songs like
that is horrible, man.
All the music out there was they didn't want us overstimulated, so we weren't allowed to listen to music over a certain BPM. And what I mean by that, it was primarily James Taylor. And I mean, to this day, I will go running out of a CVS when they're playing James Taylor.
Right, dude.
I can't do it.
James Taylor is a trigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's a soundtrack to my trauma.
Misery. Yeah, right.
Absolutely. There's certain songs like that, The Rose being one of them. But yeah, anyway, most people, yes. So, but what happened with me was that I was 18. I had this extended custody filed against me. I was very close to graduating. It was actually an accredited school,
right?
Believe it or not.
Sure.
I was dating somebody, which obviously you weren't allowed to do, but I was dating somebody who was a couple months younger than me. So they were still 17, and we got caught together.
Uh-oh.
And they said that I was, a sexual predator going after minors.
Okay.
Which was cool. That's a fun thing to have over your head as an 18-year-old
right, of course.
girl.
Yeah.
After everything else. And they kicked me out. But because I had this thing filed against me, I couldn't legally leave. I couldn't legally go home until I finished high school. So I was sent to a mental hospital for 6 months, where I had to then teach myself the rest of my courses on my own without a tutor or anything. It was just books and testing out to graduate. So
Mm-hmm.
where I would have been out of there within a couple months, I was there for a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
Again in lockdown, again in a
Mm-hmm.
psych ward, which we really was like insult to injury at that point, because I was kind of like guys, I got it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna keep doing this shit. Just please, like, don't lock me up again.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, there was no ceremony. They didn't play the rose. They eventually unlocked the door for me and were like, "Here's
Yeah.
a shuttle to the airport. Good luck, kid."
Oh, wow.
Um, at that point, though, like, as much as I didn't, I guess for me, it's weird because I didn't start with AA. I didn't start with a 12 step. I didn't do the steps in a traditional way.
Right.
But there were certain things out there that kind of addressed each of them
Yeah,
a
they were
little
kind of
bit.
probably steered more towards like cognitive behavioral therapy,
Right.
kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
More emotional growth.
Right.
But I kind of was like, I guess for me, at a point, I was like, I'm not going to break to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, I am here for this amount of time. There are certain tools here that could be of value if I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to separate it from the insanity. And I made the very conscious decision to just try to take from it what I could. And I was
Mm-hmm.
very desperate not to go back to that. I was desperate not to feel that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Right.
want my whole life to be that. People out there seem to be happy. They seem to be doing things they loved. That at that time wasn't a possibility for me. That wasn't even a reality in my mind that that could be a thing.
Right.
Um,
Well, and when you're
but I
that
wanted it.
young, but when you're that young, also you have the mindset that this is like, this is forever. You know,
Right,
you don't,
right,
you have no frame
right.
of reference. Like a
Well,
week is
yeah,
forever.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it felt like forever. It's
Mm-hmm.
even just your teenage years. It's a very short period of time, but it feels like it goes forever.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also dealing with the heightened hormones and emotions and things like that. So when I got out, they had let me go on one home visit, and at that time, I didn't drink. At that point, I'd realized like I wasn't going to drink anymore, and I really thought that was kind of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I smoked a ton of weed when I came home on that home visit, because in my mind I was like, I'm not going to drink. Meth doesn't seem to be super good, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to smoke weed. That seems normal. That was never my drug of choice. That was always kind of like supplementary. Like if I couldn't get a hold of something else, weed was always
Right.
accessible.
Sure.
So I was like, I can just do this. Like it was never a thing for me. And I, on this short trip was smoking to the point that I was blacking out and passing out. And, because you start where you left off. You don't
Right.
just like work your
Yeah.
way back up again.
You are there to get faded.
Exactly.
Right.
But I realized that sure, I could come do that, but eventually it wasn't the high that I craved. Eventually it was going to lead me back to what I really wanted. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
worth it, especially so new in recovery. It wasn't worth fucking around with that at all for me. And it's interesting too, because coming in 23 years ago, it was very black and white. You are sober or you are not sober. And now there's a lot more leniency around like what the definition of sober is, what
Right.
works for different people.
Well, and that's what I think, like that's where the term California sober comes in.
Right,
And
right.
I'm like, hey man, if you can navigate that and it doesn't affect you in a bad way, then
Good for
knock
you.
yourself out. Yeah. I
Right,
mean, I'm not
right,
here to judge. I'm not here to tell you how to run your show. If you can do it
right,
successfully, then,
right,
Godspeed.
right. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like regarding substance, even regarding AA, like there's no one way that works for 100% of people. And that's true of anything.
Right.
So I'm not here to judge anybody else. I just personally, it didn't
Right.
work for me.
Chad's here to
So
judge everybody though.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Just
there's
to
always
just
one
to
of
judge
you.
everybody. Yeah. Yeah, no. Earlier when you were talking though, I heard the rooms come out in your voice. Well, I heard the book actually because you were talking about all of this stuff that happened, and then you alluded to the fact that basically we find at some point we invariably placed ourselves in positions to later be hurt, right?
Right, right. Right.
So I totally get that, because there's a lot
I
of
appreciate you
healing
saying
that
that.
comes on with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, so for me too, when I came home, I did start going to AA, but more I went to young people's meetings, and it was more to meet
Mm-hmm.
people that were my age because I was in culture shock. I was back on the streets after this insane experience.
Right.
Cell phones were a thing suddenly.
Nice.
Um,
Flip
I
phone.
didn't know how
No,
to drive.
Nokia.
It wasn't even a flip phone yet. It was just kind of that like
The
flat block.
Nokia. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
Well,
couldn't
that's
drive. I
funny
couldn't do
that
anything.
that's funny that you said like that they had like I guess they have kids meetings for
They have young
recovery.
people meetings.
Yeah. Because it would be weird to be like going to like an old timers meeting. Hey, there's a meth
Right.
head trucker from Pennsylvania in my recovery group.
Glad you made it in.
Hey, good to see
Been a
you.
while.
Good to see you, young lady.
Right. Right.
Right.
So, but it was the only way I kind of knew how to make friends who were doing something that could potentially support this new lifestyle for me. Because it
Sure.
was really hard for me to go into college and pretend to be normal around these people or what like we consider to be normal, especially
Mm-hmm.
at that age when you're
Right.
so insecure and you have no idea what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I stayed in AA for the first 5 years. Um, and I'm not currently going to meetings. So when you
Mm-hmm.
say that, you hear the big book and I appreciate that because at this point, in some ways, doing things like this, I'm actually speaking in a meeting in Boston in a couple days. And I do have a little bit of imposter syndrome around that just because I feel like I'm so far removed from that at this point
Mm-hmm.
that, um, it can be off-putting to people. That was part of my own experience in AA as well, is that because I did things a little bit differently, because I came from a very different recovery path,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was threatening to people in that
Right.
time, in that very acute phase. And I felt kind of pushed out because I
Right.
wasn't doing things exactly the way that the expectation was laid out.
Sure.
Um, that being said, I'm a huge supporter of 12-step groups,
Right.
especially coming in fresh off the street. You don't have to do this by yourself. You shouldn't try to do
Right.
this by yourself.
Well, and
But
that's
I
what I
do
love.
also,
I love what you're saying about that because AA. A lot of people are turned off by the powerless over whatever, and then also the God part, the higher power part.
right, right, right,
And I can understand that. But I also see that these are it's not exactly right for everyone.
right,
But I definitely think it is a good foundation that is in place in every city, available to everyone to
right. For free,
utilize. Yeah, for free. Yeah, and
right,
basically, I mean, the 12 steps are designed for you to deal with your own shit,
right,
and let it go and be able to move on and to
right,
to foster your relationship with your higher power,
right,
and then pay it forward. It's
right. And
basically
I mean,
that. So
I think it's kind of like the whole, in my mind anyway, the point is to provide a structure for you to take your life back and
mhm.
for something to give you your life back. But a lot of people then make it their life,
Yeah.
and that's where I find issue with it
Hmm.
personally.
Right.
Well,
um
there's like it's a process of like self-discovery, and you're supposed to discover
sure,
who you are, um, like inside of the program, right?
right,
Like it
right,
helps you like discover who you are. But a lot of people, yeah, it'll fail if that becomes your entire identity because it's still not you.
right,
Right.
Right.
right,
And that's like,
exactly,
it's unfortunate, but I mean, we're drug addicts and alcoholics, right? Like we're
right.
the
We
next
need to
cool
find
thing
something
I'm just going
else.
to cling on to.
Exactly,
And
Right.
that
exactly.
tends to
And that,
happen a lot.
well, but it's also, I mean, you when you come in, your identity, you're an addict, you're an alcoholic. That's your identity.
Mm-hmm.
You need a new identity at a point when you're in like an acute stage. And a lot
Hmm.
of people can't then move past that. And at the end of the day, like that's all right. That's if that's your path, man, that's your path. That just
Right.
wasn't my path. And that was
Sure.
something that was threatening to a lot of the people around me at the time. And it became a kind of a toxic situation for me.
Yeah.
I also had been, coming in, I'd been 13 step by somebody who was 8 years older than me with a lot of time. And when that fell apart, inevitably, it was ugly for me in the rooms
Right.
as well. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I do really strongly support the program though.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, like, I mean, what would you say? Like, I mean, well, you went back to, I mean, did you end up going to college?
So I did for a little while. I went to Mass Art for fashion design and photography, and I'm actually still a
Right.
costume designer.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, I did not finish though,
Uh,
because I was there when the recession hit, and it
uh-huh.
was kind of like the choice was feeding myself or going to school because
Mm-hmm.
all of my jobs were getting cut back to part time. So I was having to work a million jobs just trying to survive. And the goal was like go back at a certain point, and I just never did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I've regretted
Yeah.
always. But I think at this point, for a while there, it was kind of like if you didn't have a degree, you weren't really deemed of value in society. And I think we're kind of past that at this point a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, I would love to have that, but I don't think at 41 years old, I'm going to be going back and finishing my undergraduate degree in fashion design now.
And it's
Right.
also like not necessary if you're already working in the
It's
field and have
not.
been.
Yeah.
No, it's not
It's
necessary at
not.
all. Because experience
It's
speaks more
not.
volumes than having a fucking plaque above your head. You know?
Right. And to be honest, I really struggled with school because my education, um, I guess my mom says I'm intelligent but not well educated. Because when you're getting kicked out of a school every year and a half and going somewhere in a different state potentially, because I went to a bunch of boarding schools prior to that, um, it's eclectic. The curriculum's eclectic everywhere you go. So
Right.
I didn't really learn how to learn in those traditional spaces. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
learn a lot of those skills. So when it came to college, where at that point it's expected you know how to test, study, homework, things like that, I didn't have those skills. So it was really
Right.
hard for me.
And did you find it awkward though in college where people were like, "Well, why don't you drink?" You
Oh,
know,
it was
that kind of thing.
awful.
Yeah.
It was awful at first. And it was kind of like, I already felt so weird because, one of the things that happened when I got sent away, they tell your parents to throw away all your clothes.
Uh-huh.
So coming back, I didn't, also 2.5 years of style had changed at that point. So I had weird
Right.
clothes and like I didn't fit in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it suddenly like everybody wants to go out and party and do all these things. And I knew at the time that that was probably not going to be the move for me, especially when I
Uh-huh.
was really trying to find myself and fit in. That I knew that wasn't going to be right. But yeah, it was isolating for me for sure.
Yeah.
And then
I can
also
imagine.
those first
Yeah.
couple of years, it was kind of wearing that badge of like, I'm in recovery. I'm in recovery, and really
Yeah.
identifying with that and telling everybody. Where at this
Mm-hmm.
point, it's kind of like if it comes up, it comes up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's not so prevalent, and then it's just a lifestyle that you've chosen. So,
Right.
I was gonna say, but speaking of lifestyles, I mean, how do you get into, go dancing, and then also getting to where it's actually part of your gig.
Um, I've been part of the dance music community forever, but
Uh huh.
that's kind of where I found my place, both
Mm-hmm.
before I got sober and after. Of that's that's where it was kind of like things clicked for me. Everything felt right.
Mm-hmm.
Dancing, my mom was a professional dancer. She was a
Okay.
modern dancer in New York City in the 70s.
Oh, cool.
So when I was little, she always danced with me. So I always loved dance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's funny because I really didn't go to like bars at first, but as soon as I got home, I started going to nightclubs. And I
Mm-hmm.
went with my sober friends. So I had a
Yeah.
sober group of people. The Avalon in Boston was still open at that point. I don't know if you
Uh
guys are
huh.
familiar with that one.
Yeah.
And so I kind of cut my teeth on that dance floor, which that was my higher education of clubbing was the Avalon with a group
Right.
of sober people. And I'd go in and I'd see the dancers and I've wanted to do it so bad.
Right.
It just like I'd wait till the platforms they had, people would dance on when they weren't up there, and I'd wait for them to get off, and I'd jump up there and just start dancing and like
Right.
throwing elbows at everybody around me until I just had the platform to myself. There's this crazy
Right.
chick up there that's fucking throwing elbows at everybody.
Right.
And so I go up there and pretend to be a go-go dancer. For years, the relationship I was in at the time was very controlling. So pursuing something like that at the time was not okay. But pretty much as soon as I got out of that in 2007, I was like, I'm going to go dance. And ironically, at the time, I was like researching because there wasn't a lot of information accessible. Like now, there's Facebook groups, there's a whole networks of people. Like
Right.
back then, there was like nothing. Like how do you even do this? So somebody actually contacted me. They'd seen I was modeling and things like that at the time. They'd seen my model mayhem. I think that they were kind of like trying to like get to know me.
Oh.
Right.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Slide into your DMs.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I was 23 at the time. But he was like, hey, you know, have you ever thought about dancing? And I was like, yeah, actually, I really would like to do that. And he said, well, listen, like if you want, we're going to be holding auditions soon, but we had a girl call out tonight. Can you come in tonight and dance at this club in Boston? And I'm like, yeah, that seems cool. I can do that. And it was awful. I was awful. I was terrible. We're all awful at things when we first start. I was awful.
Sure.
I was like a baby giraffe on ice skates out there.
All right.
Yeah. Because in my head, I was like a fucking amazing dancer. And then you actually get on a platform and all these people are looking at you and you're doing 20-minute sets without having practice with things like that. And I thought I was going to die. And then I didn't want to go back up.
Right.
But, you know, prior to that, you know, before I even was dancing, I was living in Boston, but my family was in Florida. I was going back and forth a lot. Just kind of in things I had met DJ Icy just out in the club one night randomly.
Sure.
And we became friends, and that was before I was even dancing.
Shout out Edward.
Absolutely.
Right.
One of my favorite people. So, but yeah, we became friends. And then when I told him that I was dancing suddenly, like he kind of like kicked me some opportunities.
Oh, that's cool.
And really helped me kind of get things started.
Right.
And was a really good friend to me through that. And so I just kind of built my way up in the industry. I was doing resident nights in Boston, but with those connections, I'd always been a fan of breakbeats and, you know, especially kind of like coming through the rave scene in the late 90s in Florida. That was something that I'd always loved. I'd always been a fan of him. I never thought that we'd become friends.
Right.
And that's true of a lot of people at this point. I remember like riding around in cars when I was 14 years old, listening to things like freestylers and shit like that. And never in my life would I ever think that I'd be like hanging out with these people and dancing for them as an adult.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just kind of, I just really pursued it. I realized that for me, performing is the one time that I feel 100% alive.
Right.
And it's that time I feel 100% my truest, most authentic self.
Right.
And it's not just like dancing. We all have kind of an ancestral memory with dance. Like it makes us feel good. It makes us feel connected. It releases, again, chemicals in your brain, connects people to one another because of those chemicals. And because you feel amazing.
Yeah.
But performing for me is that higher level of that. And to this day, I mean, I've been doing it. I just passed my 18-year anniversary dancing professionally.
Right.
And to this day, I still get the butterflies. I still get the nerves before I step out on stage that first time.
Yeah.
And it's everything to me. And so people ask, you know, how can you do this? How can you be sober? How can you be sober and do all the things you do? Because, you know, I don't recommend it necessarily, but I spend most of my times in bars and clubs, and I love doing that. I love the community. I love That's just what I do.
Right.
I'm a nightlife person.
Yeah.
But with dancing especially, I realized that if I use, I can't have any of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna go away, or there's a potential for it to go
Exactly.
away. Yeah,
Well,
and I'm
and it
I'm
would go
like the
away
same way.
quickly.
Yeah, like with music and DJing and everything, it's like, man, I'm just a part of the circus, and now now I just don't drink with all the other cast members. It's just,
Right,
but
that's
it's just like I'm just it's something that I love to do, that fulfills me, that makes me happy, just like, dancing does for you. So I'm not going to
exactly.
give that up. I'm not going to give that up just because everybody's, faded or hammered
Right,
around me. I mean, it's good for you,
right.
man. Have fun, have one for me.
Well, exactly. Have fun.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
people ask me all the time, like, doesn't it drive you crazy? And it's kind of like for me, like, it drives me crazy at that point. Like, people annoy me at the point that everybody gets annoyed. Like, if
Right.
somebody is wasted and belligerent and telling you the same story four
Right.
times in a row with the same emphasis on certain sound effects, it's going to
Right.
fucking annoy you.
Yeah,
That's just
sure.
what it is. Anybody, it
Right.
doesn't matter if you're sober or not.
Right.
Um, I don't mind being around it. I don't have that temptation. I've been sober long enough that it seems like drugs have changed a whole lot since I was
Oh yeah.
using.
Do I like fentanyl, man? Forget
Well,
Well, it's
you
about it.
used you did
scary.
Yeah.
you were doing fucking real meth. The shit they have
I
now
was
is like
doing
fucking
exactly. I
wasp
was doing real
spray.
ecstasy. Molly was
Right.
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
So, you know, there are moments where like, yeah, like if I could do ecstasy again, that'd be fucking awesome. Yes. I can't though.
Right.
That's not my reality. If you
Right.
Yeah.
can, cool.
Yeah.
But like I can't.
Right.
So, and it's never even crossed my mind. There's such a hard boundary in my head of like, I don't do these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not negotiable.
Right.
Um, the one thing that for me in the past year I have started doing is actually microdosing with psilocybin,
Mm-hmm.
um, but not so much with the intention of getting wasted, more for the mental health benefits of it. And that
Mm-hmm.
too was after huge amounts of research,
Right.
and also kind of like seeing the benefit. A lot of people are
Now,
using that in recovery.
are you able to navigate that successfully? Because,
Yes,
microdose can turn into macrodose.
Yeah.
you
easily,
know.
easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't, and for me, I don't feel anything when
Mm-hmm.
I take it. It's
Yeah.
not mind altering for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I don't just sit there like eating handfuls of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I gotcha.
not what I'm doing it for. I went into it very, very cautiously though, and it's certainly not something I recommend for everybody, especially people in
Mm-hmm.
early recovery.
Right.
Um, but it's not something that I felt a lot of temptation around. It's something that like back in the day, I didn't love doing mushrooms, but we were
Mm-hmm.
getting it out of cow shit back then too. So it
Right.
always made me sick. I didn't love it. I
Right.
had a lot of bad
Now
trips.
they have chocolate bars.
Now they have chocolate bars. It's true.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Hey, so real
Yeah.
quick, I mean, while we're gonna wrap up here, but like if somebody, wants, I mean, do you have an agent, or do people just hit you up direct to have you, do do you do fire dancing or anything like that, or is it
I don't
just,
do fire
you know,
dancing. I
okay,
dance. I'm known mainly just for dancing, but also I make all my own costumes.
uh-huh,
So that's a big part of what I do. I'm independent though,
right,
but I am open to bookings. People can hit me up on my Instagram,
okay,
which
and what is that?
is it's Reign Loves, REIGNLOVES. But if people want to DM me or if you have my Facebook, hit me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to travel. And
Right.
I have very competitive rates because I'm not doing this for, I mean, obviously I do it to cover expenses for money,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't, it's a labor of love for me. I do it because
Sure.
it's so fulfilling for me. And also, I'm 41 years old. I'm not going to be able to do this forever.
Right.
So
Sure.
the more I can dance now, the better. And I
Right.
don't just dance to breaks. I dance to everything.
Okay, cool. Well, that is good to know. That is good to know. And perhaps we shall see you at one of our events when we
Yeah,
start
I'd love
playing.
that. I'd love that.
Right. But yeah, so anything you'd like to, any shout outs or anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Shout out to Joy for connecting us on this
Oh,
one.
right.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah,
such a
for sure.
beautiful soul.
She
I
is
finally
a
actually met her in Miami this year.
so did I. That's funny. I met her at the Clevelander. She is genuinely that sweet.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
is. She is.
I'm like,
So,
what night did
yeah.
you meet her on Saturday?
I met her on Friday night. She came out to the party I was dancing at.
Okay, cool.
So,
We were
yeah.
close. And then I met her on Sunday night. So at the
Yeah.
at the Clevelander.
Yeah. So
Oh,
that
cool.
was wonderful. And thank you guys for having me too. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no
it.
problem, and congratulations on the forced sobriety, but then maintaining it throughout the years. I mean, 23
Thank you.
years is huge, so I applaud that. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
I
and
appreciate it.
yeah. I appreciate you coming on. Next week, we actually have a bit of a tribute to Defuse, who recently passed away.
Yeah.
So we will, that's going to be a good episode, kind of hearing his
Yeah.
backstory from his writing partner. But I appreciate you being on, Kriss. Chad, as always, I appreciate you being here and with your fancy tattoo.
Yeah.
You look and your loss of weight.
Thanks, man.
You're looking good, buddy.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you so
And I
much.
mean that so
I fucking mean that.
sincerely.
You sack of shit. Hell yeah.
Anyway, be sure to like, subscribe, all that stuff. And remember, kids, there is no magic pill for sobriety, because if there was, we would all take too many.